What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and coming up on today's episode, the team started phase 1 of its voluntary offseason program. So we'll talk about the players returning to the team headquarters and look ahead to the 2023 NFL Draft. All that and more coming up. For today's episode of Broncos Now, joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio is fellow team reporter Phil Milani. Phil, thanks for being on again. It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Always good to be on.
Agreed. Well, Phil, the team, they started their voluntary offseason program this week. So the players are back in the building for phase 1, focusing on strength and conditioning. It was nice to see the players back. I feel like the building's been so empty the past couple months.
Whenever they come back, there's just such a good energy, about it. And
it feels like football's back.
Exactly. And like the intensity of like the fall isn't quite there. So it's like a little bit more relaxed, but good energy. And those guys have been busy getting to work.
Yeah, they definitely have. I know head coach Sean Payton said at the annual league meeting a couple weeks ago that the Broncos will extend this phase 1 period for, up to a month. And I know typically that's about 2 weeks before they start to focus on the on-field prep. They're kind of taking a different approach this year, aren't they, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, they have a totally new strength and conditioning coaching staff, so a different approach to how to get ready to practice football.
Right.
And I know that at the league meetings there, Sean Payton was just talking about how he thinks that 2 weeks is just too fast,
it kind of is.
To go from not doing much and just working out on your own to just get right back on the football. Yeah. That can lead to some injuries, and the Broncos need to avoid that. And I do think that just looking at how this Broncos team has done stuff in the past, they had to shake some stuff up. And I think doing this does a couple of things. One, I think just actually physically, it helps them get ready and maybe avoid some injuries, which has plagued this team. Yeah. But another thing is, I think mentally it makes them a little bit tougher. It says, hey, we're here to work. We're here to, this is not going to be fun.
Lifting, running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that it does two things. Gets them ready to play physically and practice physically, but also I think it kind of makes them a little bit mentally tougher.
Yeah, definitely, Phil. Well, I know this year's NFL draft is coming up in a couple of weeks. The Broncos, they got 5 picks this year, 2 back-to-back picks in the 3rd round, a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, and a 6th. No 1st or 2nd round this year. Yeah. How do you think maybe they'll approach the draft this year then, Phil?
It's interesting. Not so much buzz, huh?
I know.
It's hard to get too excited for the 3rd round. Yeah. But if you think about how football teams are constructed, that's like the meat of the draft. That's where you get a lot of your players that end up sticking around. There's a lot of good 3rd round picks that are still out there. So maybe not household names that coming out of college, but once they become Broncos or if they join whatever your favorite team is, then you get to know them because they're contributing all the time. And this Broncos team needs to hit on these 5 picks. It kind of puts the pressure on them only having 5 picks. Because, they need some guys who are going to play as rookies. And so it'll be interesting to see how they try to do this. Like if you look at what they did in free agency, they brought in a lot of big physical guys, Mike McGlinchey, Ben Powers, Zach Allen, Manhurts, the tight end.
Right.
These are big dudes that are physical. And so maybe that kind of gives you an idea of what Sean Payton's looking for, what kind of attitude, what kind of mentality he wants his team to have. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and try to get some physical guys, some bigger guys. And, one thing when we were at the league meetings, we talked to the MMQB's Albert Breer.
Yeah.
One thing he mentioned to us was, hey, Coach Payton sort of feels like with the skill guys, he can help coach them and get the most out of the talent they have.
Yeah.
And so he thinks, hey, the skill position, I can create a great scheme. I can call a great game. I can coach these guys up. Right. But what he can't coach is 6'6", 350, you know,
Right.
you just got to have those physical tools. So it'll be interesting to see if they continue to add to the offensive line, the defensive line, if they want to just continue to beef that area up, or, hey, are they going to go out and try to get another tight end, another playmaker, a running back, you know, are they going to try and get an edge guy to help, you know, put some pressure on opposing quarterbacks?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how they go out there and approach this draft.
For sure. Yeah, Phil, you just mentioned a few positions there. Let's look at the offense to start.
Yeah.
Where do you think, or how do you hope to see them target some of those positions you just mentioned? And are there any guys that you think or that you've heard about?
First of all, I would take the best available player, like no matter what position.
Agreed.
I think that the Broncos are in that sort of position where they just need really good players. So if they got a guy at a position they feel like they've got some talent at, but he's the best player in their draft, I'd still take him. I think the Broncos are in that area. But on offense, I think another playmaker makes sense. Maybe somebody who's like a little bit different than a Javonte Williams or a Samad J.P. Somebody who can maybe is a speedster. I could see them trying to add somebody there that's like that.
Yeah.
I could see them trying to bring in another pass-catching tight end. I'm really interested in what happens with Albert Okwuegbunam.
Yeah.
Like I like that was so weird what happened last year with him.
It was. Yeah.
Like did they was something wrong with him, or did he just not fit, or did he not get along with the previous coaching staff? Because at the end of the year, when he played in those 2 games, he looked good.
Yeah, he scored a touchdown.
So I'm wondering what Sean Payton thinks about him. Wondering how he can get the most out of Greg Dulcich.
Yep.
But maybe they get another tight end, somebody who is like near the top of the class in tight ends, because third round is when you start to see some of those tight ends go off the board.
There's a lot of tight ends in this draft.
Yeah. So I could see them doing like some sort of a playmaker, whether that's a running back or a tight end, or even heck, another wide receiver maybe. I could see them going in that direction.
I know you mentioned earlier too, maybe D-line or edge rushers. Who are you looking at on defense then?
Yeah, I think edge rusher. I do think they need some sort of somebody there, because
George Payton says you can never have enough.
Yeah, exactly. And Randy Gregory has had a lot of injury concerns over his career. I don't think he's ever played
6 games last year.
Yeah, a full season. But when he's on the field, he's terrific. I mean, he's a playmaker.
He is.
But if you're assuming he's going to miss a little bit of time, Baron Browning on the other side had a little bit of injury problems last year, and he's not quite like that premier pass rusher, not yet at least, unless he takes another step here.
Take another step this year.
Then last year they took Nick Bonito with their first pick in the second round there. He didn't quite have the rookie season I think most were hoping for. And then Jonathan Cooper, Jacob Martin, they round out that room there. So I could see them being like, hey, we need another person there. So I could see that. Maybe another cornerback. You know, like that's another thing they did in free agency was they tried to get some guys who could play special teams too.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Maybe you get a special temer and a guy who could contribute where needed at cornerback. I could see those 2 areas being where they try to attack if they're going defense.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting draft for sure, Phil. I feel like, you know, they addressed a lot of the big, you know,
offensive line was a must. They had to
100%.
do something
They had to do. They targeted a lot of things they needed in free agency. So now that it's kind of just.
Yeah.
Like what you said, getting the best player available, I think.
Yeah, and when you win 5 games like the Broncos did, there's going to be areas all across the roster where you're like, they could get a little better here, they could get a little better there. I don't mean to like pick on any position, you know, but I think that you need more good players, you know, so that's sort of where they are now. And I think that's one of the things that you like about having a coach like Sean Payton. He's been through this draft process a lot, and he's found a lot of hidden talent there. You know, Marquise Colson was a 7th round pick. I mean, he knows how to find these guys. He knows what he's looking for. And I think like a player coming in for a visit and he's in the room with Sean, he's just got that personality where I feel like he knows what he's doing in those situations. And that's why you want a guy like Sean Payton, who's like been through this a lot. he knows what he's looking for.
Right.
And even when we were at the league meetings, I asked Sean just like, hey, how's it been working with George Payton? And he was like, I've just been pleasantly surprised.
I was going to say, that's a great duo.
That's
for
a
the draft
good duo
coming up.
there because like Sean was saying, oh, you hear all these stories about George being this like football guy and this grinder.
Yeah.
And then when you are working with him, you could tell too. So I think the two of them, George Payton loves to watch so much tape and he just gets after it.
The draft is his bread and butter.
Exactly. And then Sean Payton, just getting his personality in the room with these prospects. That's a good duo that I feel like the Broncos should be able to find some talent here.
Well, regardless of only having 5 picks, it's still exciting. The draft is my favorite time of year. So
yeah.
I
It
enjoy
isn't like, hey, are they going to take Pat Surtain or Micah Parsons?
Yeah,
it's not quite
it's
like
not
that.
like that. Yeah.
You know, but it's from like a football perspective, it's really crucial because those back-to-back third-round picks, they got to hit on those.
Yep.
They got to have guys who come in and they're going to play right away. So it's crucial. Sid, before we record this, we talked to Hall of Famer Steve Atwater usually. His office is right around here.
Right around the corner.
And he was like, hey, think about how a roster is constructed. There's not that many. It's not like they're all first-round picks.
Right. Or second-round picks, really.
Or second-round picks. There's a lot of guys who are third and
fourth.
later.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and so there's talent to be found there. So you got to sift through it and find those gold pieces. Hopefully the Broncos can do that.
Yep, I hope so too.
2 weeks to go.
2 weeks,
Sid.
yeah, 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, so.
All right, well, Phil, appreciate you coming on the show again today, and thanks for your insight.
Sydney. Yeah, always appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now, Broncos Country. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay up to date on denverbroncos.com and the Denver Broncos YouTube channel for all the latest episodes. I will see you all next week.